He had everything money could buy, except someone who wanted him for free. So he did something no billionaire's son should ever do. He disappeared.
Here. Thanks.
Then his mother walked in. And the lie he built for 2 months collapsed in 10 seconds. He finally showed up as exactly who he was. The question was whether that would be enough.
Nobody in the building knew that the man mopping the marble lobby floor at 6 every morning was worth more than the company itself. If you've ever wondered whether real love can survive money, stick around for this one because the ending will stay with you. And if it does, tap that like button and subscribe because stories like this one deserve to be shared. Daniel Ashford had grown up in a world where everything had a price tag except the one thing he actually wanted. His mother, Vivian Ashford, had built Ashford Global from a single textile warehouse into a logistics empire spanning 4 continents. She was brilliant, relentless, and by the time Daniel turned 28, so consumed by boardrooms and shareholder calls that she sometimes forgot to ask her son how he was doing. Daniel had inherited her sharp mind, but none of her hunger for power. What he wanted was simple, almost embarrassingly so. He wanted someone to love him without knowing what he was worth. It hadn't always felt like a problem. In college, Daniel dated freely, laughed easily, believed people liked him for him. But the moment he graduated and stepped into the family name, something shifted. Women who used to argue with him about music now agreed with everything he said. Friends who once borrowed $20 for gas started asking about investment opportunities. At restaurants, waiters recognized his face from magazine profiles before he'd even ordered a drink. Every relationship he tried collapsed under the same quiet question he could never stop asking himself: does she want me? Or does she want this? The final straw came at his 28th birthday party, an extravagant rooftop affair his mother had insisted on hosting despite his protests. He'd overheard his date, a woman named Priscilla he'd been seeing for 3 months, tell her friend on the phone in the bathroom, "I don't even like him that much, but come on, have you seen his mother's net worth? I'd be an idiot to walk away from this." Daniel left his own party without saying goodbye to anyone. He drove for hours that night, ending up parked outside Ashford Global's headquarters, staring up at the glass tower his mother had built. Through the lobby windows, he noticed something he'd never paid attention to before: a cleaning crew, moving quietly through the building long after the executives had gone home, invisible to almost everyone who worked there. He watched an older janitor patiently mop the same stretch of floor 3 times, until it gleamed, taking genuine pride in work nobody would ever thank him for. That was the night the idea took root. 2 weeks later, Daniel walked into Ashford Global's Human Resources Department, wearing secondhand clothes he'd bought specifically for the occasion. A plain digital watch, replacing the one that cost more than most people, A's cars, and a fabricated resume under the name Danny Cole. He'd shaved carefully to look a little rougher, a little more tired, and he'd rehearsed his cover story until it felt almost true. Recently laid off from a warehouse job, needed steady work, willing to take whatever shift was available. The HR coordinator, a tired woman named Beth who processed dozens of applications a week, barely looked up before assigning him to the night cleaning crew on the building's east wing, the finance floor. Daniel signed his fake name on the employment form, and just like that, the heir to Ashford Global became employee number 4471, hourly cleaning staff, reporting at 6 p.m., 5 nights a week. His mother had no idea. Vivian believed her son was taking time to find himself after quitting the junior analyst position she'd arranged for him. In a way, she wasn't wrong. The cleaning crew was a small, tight-knit group of people who had no reason to trust a stranger, and Daniel quickly learned that being invisible required earning invisibility. You had to prove you belonged in the background before anyone let their guard down around you. His supervisor, a broad-shouldered man named Reggie who had worked at Ashford Global for 11 years, tested him hard the first week, giving him the worst bathrooms, the heaviest trash routes, the stairwells nobody wanted. Daniel didn't complain. 2 decades of country club tennis lessons had done nothing to prepare his back for 8-hour shifts of mopping and lifting, but he showed up every night, sore and sincere, and slowly, the crew warmed to him. It was on his 9th night that he first saw her. Her name was Marisol Reyes, and she worked the same finance floor, though not as a cleaner. She was a junior financial analyst, 26 years old, who often stayed late finishing reports long after her department had emptied out. Daniel noticed her before he ever spoke to her, the way she double-checked her spreadsheets 3 times before sending them, the way she said thank you to every cleaner who passed her desk instead of pretending they were furniture, the way she brought an extra sandwich most nights and quietly left it on the break room table without ever mentioning it was for the night crew. The first time she spoke to him directly, Daniel was struggling to fix a jammed paper shredder near her desk at nearly 9 at night. "You have to pull the lever on the side before you feed more paper in," she said, not looking up from her monitor. "Everyone makes that mistake the first month." "Thanks," Daniel said, genuinely surprised she'd noticed him struggling. "I'm still learning the building." "You'll get it." She finally glanced over, offering a small, tired smile. "I'm Marisol. You're new on nights, right?" "Danny," he said, the lie sitting strange but manageable in his mouth. "Yeah, started last week." "Well, Danny, welcome to the floor where nobody goes home on time." She gestured at the stacks of paper on her desk. "Quarterly reports. My boss thinks Fridays don't count as weekends anymore." He laughed, and something about her dry, self-aware humor made the rest of the night pass easier than any night had in months. Over the following weeks, their conversations became a quiet ritual. Marisol would stay late, and Daniel would find reasons to clean near her desk a little longer than necessary. She told him about growing up in a 2-bedroom apartment with her mother and 3 siblings, about putting herself through business school on scholarships and night shifts at a diner, about how she'd taken the analyst job at Ashford Global because it was the first company that had ever looked past her state school degree and actually given her a chance. She talked about her dreams of one day running her own small investment firm, one that would take chances on people the big banks overlooked, the way nobody had ever taken a chance on her family. She never once asked Danny about money, connections, or ambition. She asked him if he'd eaten dinner. She asked if his back was doing better after a long shift. She asked what music he listened to while he worked, and when he admitted he mostly worked in silence, she started leaving one earbud on her desk so he could listen to her strange, wonderful playlists while he emptied the recycling bins nearby. Daniel found himself, for the first time in years, forgetting to think about what he was worth. With Marisol, he was simply Danny, a guy with tired feet and an honest laugh, someone whose company she seemed to genuinely enjoy for no reason beyond the enjoying itself. But the deception weighed on him more with every passing week. He started keeping a mental list of everything he wanted to tell her once the truth finally came out, rehearsing apologies in his head during the drive home each night. He told himself he'd end the experiment soon, just one more week, just long enough to be sure what he was feeling was real. He wasn't prepared for how fast one more week turned into 2 months. The trouble started when Vivian Ashford decided to conduct a surprise night audit of building operations, a habit she'd developed early in her career and never abandoned, believing that a company's true character showed itself after the executives went home. She arrived at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, security detail trailing a respectful distance behind her, and walked directly onto the finance floor to review overtime logs with the department head. Daniel was on his knees repairing a flickering hallway light fixture when he heard his mother's voice carry down the corridor. He froze, tool belt rattling, then ducked into a supply closet just as she rounded the corner, her sharp heels clicking against the marble with the same rhythm he'd known his entire life. He nearly made it. He would have made it if Marisol hadn't chosen that exact moment to walk toward the supply closet looking for extra printer paper. "Danny?" she said, opening the door and finding him crouched awkwardly behind a shelf of cleaning supplies. "What are you?" "Oh, Marisol Reyes." Vivian's voice arrived a moment later, having overheard the name from down the hall, curious about the late-night quality of a junior analyst's dedication. She appeared in the doorway, immaculate even at 10 at night, eyes sweeping the small closet, and landing with unmistakable recognition on her own son's face. The silence that followed felt, to Daniel, longer than any boardroom negotiation he'd ever witnessed. "Daniel," Vivian said slowly, What exactly are you doing in a supply closet in a janitor's uniform? Marisol's expression shifted through confusion, then dawning realization, then something colder and more painful, betrayal settling into her features as the pieces clicked together. Daniel, she repeated quietly, testing the real name in her mouth like it tasted wrong. Ashford, as in... Marisol, I can explain, Daniel said, stepping out of the closet, the lie finally, irreversibly collapsing around him. You're her son. Marisol's voice was flat, disbelieving. You've been lying to me for 2 months. About your name, your job, everything. I wasn't trying to hurt you, Daniel said. I just wanted... You wanted what? To see how the little people live? The hurt in her voice sharpened into something closer to anger. Do you know how many nights I told you things I've never told anyone? About my mom's medical bills, about how scared I am I'll never actually make partner here because I don't have the right last name. And the whole time you were laughing at me, playing dress-up in a job you never actually needed. I wasn't laughing at you. I have never once laughed at you. Daniel's voice cracked in a way it hadn't in years. Marisol, everything I told you was true. Everything I felt was true. The only lie was my name. That's not a small lie, Danny. That's the whole foundation. She looked at Vivian, then back at Daniel, humiliation flooding her face at having been observed in this moment by the CEO herself. I need to go. She left without another word, walking fast down the corridor, and Daniel didn't chase her, because some part of him understood that chasing her right then would only prove the exact thing she feared most, that his money gave him permission to demand her attention even when she'd asked for space. Vivian, to her credit, didn't yell at her son in front of the security detail. She simply studied him for a long moment, the way she might study a struggling division of the company, searching for the source of the problem. You've been working here, as a janitor, for 2 months. It wasn't quite a question. I wanted someone to know me without knowing this. Daniel gestured vaguely at the building, at the name on the lobby wall, at everything his family represented. I finally found her, Mom, and I ruined it by not trusting her enough to tell her the truth from the start. Vivian was quiet for a long time. Then she said something Daniel hadn't expected. Your father did something similar, you know, before we got engaged. He worked 3 weeks at my father's shipping company under a fake name because he didn't believe I'd take him seriously as just an engineer. I found out anyway. I was furious for exactly 4 days. What happened after 4 days? I realized being furious wasn't going to change how much I respected that he cared enough to risk looking like a fool. She studied her son. The lying isn't the part she'll forgive easily. But if what you feel is real, you don't get to give up after one bad night. You go back, honestly, this time. For the following week, Daniel didn't go back to the finance floor. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't send flowers he knew she'd see as a bribe. Instead, he did something he should have done from the very beginning. He learned about the parts of her life he'd only heard about secondhand. He researched the medical facility where her mother received treatment and quietly, anonymously, ensured her mother's outstanding balance was cleared. Not as a gift to buy Marisol's forgiveness, but because it was simply the right thing to do for a family who had been struggling, and he made certain the donation could never be traced back to him in a way that would feel like a transaction. Then he requested a formal meeting with HR, resigned properly from his janitorial position under his real name, and asked Vivian for one thing: a chance to speak in front of the leadership team about promoting from within the analyst pool based on merit rather than pedigree, using Marisol's own overlooked proposal, a plan for a micro-investment fund aimed at first-generation business owners, as his primary example. He didn't tell Marisol about any of it. He wasn't trying to earn his way back into her life through grand gestures. He was trying to prove, quietly and without an audience, that the man she'd known as Danny wasn't a costume he could take off. It was closer to who he actually wanted to be than Daniel Ashford ever had been. 3 weeks later, Marisol was called into a leadership meeting to present her micro-investment proposal, the one she'd submitted 8 months earlier and assumed had been buried in some executive's inbox forever. She walked in braced for polite dismissal and instead found Vivian Ashford at the head of the table, genuinely engaged, asking sharp, respectful questions about risk modeling and community outreach. By the end of the meeting, the board had approved a pilot fund with Marisol as its founding director. She didn't know, until she was walking out of the building that evening, exhausted and elated, that Daniel had been the one who insisted her proposal reach the board in the first place, refusing to let his name attach to the recommendation at all. She found him outside, in the same spot he used to wait for the late bus back when he was still pretending, wearing his own clothes for the first time since she'd met him, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I didn't do it for you," he said. "I mean, I did, but not the way you think. Your idea was good, Marisol. It was good before I ever walked into that building pretending to be someone else. I just made sure the right people finally looked at it instead of your last name." She studied him for a long moment, arms crossed, guard still up but no longer fully closed. "I'm still angry about the lying." "I know. You should be. I'm not asking you to forget it." He took a breath. "I'm asking for the chance to be honest with you for as long as it takes to earn back something I never should have risked in the first place." It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. It took months, not minutes. Months of honest coffee conversations instead of stolen moments by a supply closet. Months of Daniel proving through small, consistent actions that Danny hadn't been a performance. Months of Marisol slowly allowing herself to trust a version of trust she'd never had reason to practice before. But it was real, built without disguises this time, in full daylight, under both their actual names. A year later, at the opening of the Ashford Community Investment Fund's first storefront office, Marisol stood at a podium as its director, and somewhere in the back of the small crowd, not seeking any credit, stood Daniel, watching the woman he loved build something that mattered on the strength of her own name. When a local reporter asked Marisol how the fund had come together, she thought for a moment before answering. "Someone once pretended to be someone else to understand what it felt like to be overlooked," she said. "And instead of forgetting that feeling once he didn't need to carry it anymore, he used it to make sure other people never had to feel it at all. That matters more to me than any last name ever could." Daniel, listening from the back of the room, finally understood something his mother had been trying to teach him his entire adult life. The point was never to hide who you were until someone loved you by accident. The point was to become someone worth loving on purpose, and then have the courage to show up as exactly that person, name and all. If this story reminded you that real love is built on honesty, not disguises, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more. And tell us in the comments what you would have done in Daniel's shoes.